Last year, more photographs were taken than in all of human history before 2000. Billions of images flood through our screens every day, and most of them are forgotten within seconds. And yet 30,000 years ago, someone pressed their hand against a cave wall, and that image still speaks to us across time. Why do some images vanish while others endure? Why do we make them at all? That's what we're going to explore today. Because an image is never just decoration. It's an argument, and it's one humanity has been making since the very beginning. Imagine yourself inside a cave, not a small one, but a vast cathedral of stone. It's cold, the air is damp, the ceiling invisible in the dark. You can hear the faint crack of fire as resin-rich wood burns, and the sound bounces off the rock like the cave itself is breathing with you. Now picture someone stepping forward with a torch. The flame flickers, and suddenly, the wall comes alive. A bison charges. A horse gallops. Antelopes leap across uneven rock as though they're moving in firelight. These are not doodles. They're not casual. Each stroke required preparation, gathering pigments, grinding them, mixing them with fat or spit. A hand filled with ochre pressed firmly against stone to leave behind a crimson imprint. These were deliberate acts of meaning. And here's the mystery. Why? Were they prayers for a successful hunt? A way of recording memory before writing existed? Were they magic, intended to bind the world to human will? We can speculate, but we'll never know for certain. The artists never left instructions. All they left was the image. What we do know is that these marks are not decoration. They're not just pretty pictures. These first artists weren't filling their caves the way we might decorate a living room wall. The images feel necessary, urgent, almost sacred. Think about it. In a world without writing, without books, without photography, the image is the only way to hold on to something. An antelope seen once in the wild disappears when it vanishes from sight. But painted on stone, it stays. A memory made durable, a thought soaked into rock. This is the first lesson of the image. It resists time. A hunter dies, but the painted horse remains. The tribe disappears, but the red handprints still press forward from the stone, saying, I was here, I touched this wall, I existed. And there's another layer. These animals weren't painted in broad daylight. They were painted deep inside the earth, in spaces that were difficult to reach. That choice matters. It means the image wasn't only about communication. It was also about journeying inward, about crossing into another kind of space, a ritual space, a sacred theater where the image came alive only by firelight. In that way, the first images weren't just pictures. They were events, performances. Imagine the gathering, flickering shadows, the painted bison seeming to move, the community gasping as the cave walls became something more than stone. It was theater. It was storytelling. It was an argument about how the world works, performed in pigment and fire. And then there's the handprints. Thousands of them scattered across caves in France, Spain, Argentina, Indonesia. Red, black, sometimes even stenciled in negative, blown through hollow bones like spray paint. A handprint is not an antelope. It's not an image of something out there. It's the image of a body, a declaration. This is me. I exist. My hand touches stone and stone remembers me. The first self-portrait wasn't a face, it was a hand. The simplest, most human argument you can imagine. When you stand in front of those marks today, tens of thousands of years later, you can't help but feel the pull. You're looking at someone's gesture across time, someone who lived and died long before your name, your city, your language existed, and yet their mark is here, pressed against the same world you walk in. That is the power of the image. From the very beginning, it was never trivial. It was a way of reaching through time, a way of saying, Remember this. Remember me. Remember us. And maybe that's why images still matter. Because before there were words, before there was history, there was this: a horse in ochre, a hand in red, a shadow leaping in firelight. The first argument humanity ever made was not spoken. It was painted. If the cave image was survival, raw, urgent, bound to the hunt and the fire, the next chapter of the image's life was about something even larger: death. Travel to the banks of the Nile. A tomb chamber lies hidden beneath sand, sealed for centuries. When the stone is pried open, the walls are still vibrant lines of hieroglyphs, figures of gods with animal heads, scenes of boats sailing across painted rivers. These were not decorations for the dead. They were provisions, instructions, a kind of visual map for the soul. To the Egyptians, death was not an ending, but a journey, and an image was not symbolic, it was functional. If a tomb wall showed a loaf of bread or a jug of beer, then in the afterlife, the dead could consume it. If it showed a boat, the dead could sail it. The image didn't represent reality, it was reality, conjured into being through pigment and ritual. The image was witness, the guarantor that the soul would find its way. And this idea spread in different forms across cultures. Think of Greek funerary vases, where painted scenes of mourning were part of the grieving ritual itself. Think of medieval tomb sculptures, where knights and queens lay in stone effigies, hands clasped in prayer, as though frozen mid-witness to their own eternity. But nowhere is the power of the image as witness more intense than in religion. Take the Byzantine icon. You've probably seen one, a saint or Christ, painted flatly, with golden background, their eyes wide and unblinking. Step into a dim Orthodox church, and the candles flicker across those faces. You look at them, and they look back. Icons weren't just paintings. To medieval Christians, they were presences. The saint wasn't represented. The saint was there, accessible through paint and wood. The icon was a window into heaven, a threshold between worlds. And because of that, people feared them as much as they revered them. In the 8th century, during the period known as the Byzantine iconoclasm, emperors ordered icons destroyed. They argued that images had become too powerful, too close to idolatry. Soldiers stormed churches, pulling down paintings, scraping eyes off Christ with knives. The destruction wasn't random vandalism, it was theological. Because if an image could be so powerful, it could also be dangerous. Think about that for a moment. We live in a world flooded with pictures, and we barely pause to notice them. But for centuries, images were so potent they could start wars, split churches, topple empires. Why? Because they were believed to act, to witness, to judge. So far, the image has been survival. It has been witness. But there is another side, a darker suspicion, that has haunted images for as long as humans have made them. The suspicion of illusion. Let's step into ancient Greece, a city-state buzzing with philosophers, sculptors, mathematicians. For the first time in history, art and philosophy stand side by side, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in tension. Here's Plato, sitting in his academy. He writes about the painter. To him, the painter is not a truth teller, but a deceiver. Why? Because reality itself, Plato argues, is already a kind of copy. The objects we see, a tree, a bed, a horse, are imperfect imitations of eternal, unchanging forms. The ideal horse exists only in the realm of forms. Every horse in the real world is just a flawed shadow of it. Now, what happens when an artist paints a horse? They are making a copy of the copy, a shadow of a shadow, twice removed from truth. For Plato, the image was a dangerous seduction. It flattered the eye, but distracted the mind from philosophy. The painter could never reveal truth, only a surface. And worse, by stirring emotions, by dazzling the senses, art could manipulate. It could make lies beautiful. This suspicion runs deep in Western thought. Even today, we carry echoes of it. The idea that images are superficial, shallow, untrustworthy. Don't be fooled by appearances, we say, a phrase Plato would have approved. And yet Greek art blossomed. Walk through the ruins of Pompeii, and you'll find frescoes so vivid you can almost feel the texture of grapes, the softness of fabric, the light glinting on marble columns. Look at Greek sculpture. Bodies idealized, poised in perfect contrapposto, skin and muscle captured with astonishing precision. And then there's the famous story of Zeuxis and Parrhasius, two painters who competed to see who could create the most convincing illusion. Zeuxis unveiled his work first, a painting of grapes so realistic that birds swooped down to peck at them. The crowd gasped. Surely nothing could be more lifelike. But then Parrhasius stepped forward. His painting showed a curtain. When Zeuxis tried to draw it aside, he realized the curtain itself was painted. He had been fooled not just as a spectator, but as a fellow artist. The story became legendary, a parable of illusion's power. The painter as trickster, able to deceive even the sharpest eyes. And here's the irony. Plato feared that art was too far removed from truth, but the artists of his time seemed determined to prove just how convincing, how seductive, how persuasive illusion could be. This tension between suspicion and celebration has never gone away. Think of the Renaissance, when artists like Brunelleschi and Alberti cracked the code of linear perspective. Suddenly, paintings could show depth, receding space, vanishing points. Walls dissolved into imagined worlds. For the viewer, it was like stepping through a window into another dimension. But was that truth? Or was it illusion, refined and perfected, a geometry of deception? Even today, we wrestle with the same question. A photograph looks objective until we notice the angle, the framing, the cropping. A digital image looks real until we realize it's been airbrushed, filtered, manipulated. The suspicion Plato voiced thousands of years ago still whispers. The image seduces. The image lies. But here's what makes it fascinating. We want to be deceived. We walk into museums eager to suspend disbelief. We lean into the illusion. We want grapes so real that birds peck at them. We want curtains so convincing that we reach to pull them back. The image, then, is not only an argument, it is also a game. A tension between knowing and being fooled, between seeing and believing. And maybe that's why images continue to hold us. They remind us that perception itself is fragile, that what we see is never the whole story. An image is never just a reflection. It is a wager, a dare, an invitation to question what is real. And that makes it not just illusion, but philosophy in pigment. For thousands of years, the image was painted, carved, drawn by hand. Every stroke, every line carried the trace of a maker's touch. But then came a revolution, the invention of the camera. In 1839, Louis Daguerre unveiled his invention to the public, the daguerreotype, a small copper plate treated with chemicals, placed inside a camera and exposed to light. After a few minutes, the plate held an image sharp, detailed, astonishingly lifelike. People were stunned. For the first time, reality itself seemed to impress its own image without human hands. No brush, no chisel, just light, metal, and chemistry. The image, for the first time, was automatic. And with that, everything changed. Painters who had spent centuries perfecting realism suddenly had competition. Why spend years learning how to paint a face when a camera could capture it in seconds? Some panicked, others adapted. Out of this disruption came new movements. Impressionism, for example, with Monet and Renoir abandoning strict realism to chase light and atmosphere instead. The image was no longer about copying reality. The machine could do that. So art began to chase something else: mood, memory, perception. But photography didn't only change painting. It changed how humans thought about truth. Because here was a picture that seemed to prove, to record, to witness: a battlefield, a portrait, a crime scene, all captured with mechanical precision. The camera never lies, people said. And yet, almost immediately, the camera lied, or rather, people used it to lie. Images were cropped, staged, altered. In the American Civil War, photographers like Alexander Gardner sometimes rearranged corpses on the battlefield to make a more striking composition. The supposed truth of photography was already mixed with performance. The image had gained a new claim: objectivity. But that claim was fragile. Behind every lens was still a choice where to point it, when to click, what to show and what to omit. And then came cinema. Imagine the first audiences in Paris, 1895, watching the Lumiere brothers' short film of a train pulling into a station. A black and white image, flickering, grainy, and yet people gasped, screamed, even ducked, convinced the train was about to burst out of the screen and crush them. The moving image was a new kind of illusion, more seductive than painting, more immersive than photography. Suddenly, images didn't just show, they unfolded in time. They told stories. They manipulated emotion with pacing, music, close-ups. The modern eye was born, trained not only to look, but to watch. And with this new power came new dangers. Cinema quickly became propaganda. Think of Leni Riefenstahl's films in Nazi Germany: monumental, hypnotic, designed to glorify power and erase doubt. The moving image could seduce entire nations. Today, you scroll through thousands of images before breakfast. Portraits, landscapes, memes, selfies, ads, each one making a claim, often invisible. Each one designed to persuade, to buy, to click, to believe. We live in what philosopher Guy Debord called the society of the spectacle, where social relations are mediated by images, and reality itself is consumed as representation. The modern eye is never at rest. It is always scanning, comparing, doubting, seduced. And yet, beneath all the noise, one question remains the same as it was in the cave. Can the image be trusted? Is it a witness, as in Egypt? A presence, as in Byzantium? An illusion, as Plato feared? Or a record, as the camera promised? Maybe it is all of these. Maybe the modern eye has to live with the paradox that every image is both truth and trick, both revelation and mask. The image is no longer just what we see, it is how we see. And in the modern world, that is everything. But perhaps the most fascinating role of the image is something more active: the image as argument. Think about Turner. His storms don't simply show clouds or crashing waves. They shout. They scream at the viewer with light, color, and motion. Look closely at Snowstorm, Hannibal and his army crossing the Alps. The humans are tiny, almost insignificant against the swirling vortex of snow and sky. Turner is making a claim: the world is vast, sublime, and merciless. Nature is a force we can admire, fear, but never control. The argument is visual, but no less persuasive than any speech or essay. We feel it in our chest before we even intellectually recognize it. Now consider Artemisia Gentileschi. Judas slaying Holofernes is not just a biblical scene. It is rage, courage, survival, and justice rendered in blood-red pigment. Artemisia's brush argues something her society often refused to acknowledge: Women can wield power, they can resist oppression, and their stories matter. The image carries the force of lived experience and argument made visible. Even simpler images make arguments. A single photograph of a child in a refugee camp, a protester holding a sign, a meme on social media. These images don't simply exist. They claim something. Notice this. Care about this. React to this. Every image, in some sense, asks a question. What do you see? What do you feel? What do you accept as true? And arguments are not always overt. Consider propaganda posters. Bold, clear, sometimes subtle. They present a narrative in a single frame, a claim about identity, ideology, or action. They persuade without words, or sometimes with words that are inseparable from the image. The argument of an image is also temporal. It changes depending on who sees it and when. A painting that inspired awe in one century may provoke outrage in another. A portrait revered as truth in one era may be exposed as forgery in the next. The viewer is part of the argument. The context is part of the argument. Think of Van Gogh. During his lifetime, his work was almost entirely dismissed. Today, his brushstrokes are studied, admired, revered. His argument about color, emotion, perception took decades to find its audience. The image, patient as ever, waited for someone willing to see it. The first cave painter never said a word, yet their handprint, their bison, their horse, still argues across tens of thousands of years. It claims existence. It claims memory. It demands to be seen. And we, as viewers, are part of the conversation. Our gaze, our understanding, our interpretation, it completes the argument. So the next time you stand before a painting, photograph, or even a digital image on your screen, ask yourself, what is this image claiming? What argument does it make? Because every image you encounter is more than decoration, more than representation, more than illusion. It is a participant in the endless conversation we call culture, history, and perception. What role do we, the viewers, play in all of this? Because an image is never alone. It does not exist in a vacuum. It requires someone to see it, to engage with it, to interpret it. The cave artist bison was powerless without the hunter's gaze. The Egyptian loaf of bread in the tomb had meaning only when believed to nourish the afterlife. The icon's gaze depended on the devotion of its audience. The image, in other words, is a conversation. It is an argument, yes, but one that always requires dialogue. It speaks, and we respond consciously or unconsciously. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we resist. Sometimes we look and look, trying to understand what it asks of us. Think of a single photograph in your life, perhaps a family photo, or a picture of a stranger that stopped you in your feed. Why did it catch your attention? What story did it carry? What claim did it make upon you? Even the most fleeting images, scrolling past in seconds, leave traces. They enter memory. They provoke thought. They nudge perception. They shape the way we see ourselves, others, the world. The image is, in this sense, a partner in shaping humanity. It persuades, it teaches, it comforts, it challenges. It has power not only over what we see, but over what we believe. And yet, there is a humility to the image. Unlike words, it cannot fully explain itself. Unlike speech, it cannot defend its argument. Unlike law, it cannot enforce its will. It waits, it invites, it tempts, it compels. And then it waits again, silently, until someone is willing to meet it halfway. Consider Van Gogh's Starry Night. When he painted it, perhaps he did not anticipate its global fame, its cultural weight, the thousands who would stand before it feeling small beneath those swirling stars. The painting's argument about emotion, nature, and perception continues to unfold, decades after the artist is gone. It finds new voices, new interpreters, new ways to speak, or think of images online today. A single photograph or meme travels across continents, seen and reshaped by millions. Its argument mutates, adapts, evolves, but its power persists. The image is patient, adaptable, enduring. And here is the lesson that binds every image we have discussed. The image exists not just to be seen. It exists to engage, to provoke thought, to act, to argue. We are not passive observers. We are participants. Each gaze completes the argument. Each interpretation extends it. Each act of remembrance, reflection, or sharing makes the image alive again. The first handprint in the cave, the golden icon in Byzantium, the photograph of a protester, Turner's tempestuous clouds, all ask us to recognize their presence, their claim, their argument. And all of them remind us, across centuries and continents, that seeing is never passive. Seeing is participation. So, what is an image, really? It is history, philosophy, illusion, truth, and argument all at once. It is human thought made visible. It is memory, emotion, and intention pressed into pigment, light, or digital code. It is a conversation across time, and we, the viewers, are invited to join. And perhaps that is the most profound thing about the images we encounter. They remind us that every glance matters, every interpretation matters, every act of seeing is, in itself, an argument. The cave artist, the Egyptian painter, the Renaissance master, the photographer, the Instagram creator, they are all speaking. And if we listen, we too become participants. We too contribute. We too argue with the world. Thank you for traveling through the history, philosophy, and power of images with me today. This has been episode 1 of The Visual Argument. Next time, we will dive into Turner's Storms, exploring the philosophy of the sublime and why a painting of wind and waves can make us feel both awe and insignificance at once. I'm Era, and this is The Visual Argument.